Have you ever felt as though you are playing a role in your own life? You smile when you don't want to. You say yes when everything in you is screaming no. You give to others endlessly, yet when you need someone, the silence is deafening. You become dependable, kind, always there. And strangely, the more you give, the more invisible you feel. It's as if you've built your identity around what others need, rather than who you truly are. And in the quiet hours when you're alone with your own thoughts, a strange, almost painful question rises. Who am I really? This is the kind of haunting silence Carl Jung warned us about. Not the silence of an empty room, but the silence of the soul when it has been smothered beneath masks, obligations, and expectations. Picture this. There's a man named Daniel. He is the kind of person everyone relies on. At work, he takes on the extra projects no one else wants. At home, he listens patiently to the problems of his friends, offering advice, encouragement, support. But late at night, when his phone finally stops buzzing, when the noise of the world fades, Daniel sits in his living room with a glass of water in his hand and feels nothing. An emptiness. Like he has given away so much of himself, there is no self left to recognize. And when someone asks him the simplest of questions, "What do you want? What do you feel?" Daniel stumbles. He doesn't know, because for so long, his entire existence has been a mirror for others. This is the tragedy of not living one's true self. Carl Jung, one of the great pioneers of psychology, spent his life studying this very condition of the human soul. He believed that each of us has within us something he called the true self, a deep, authentic core, a voice that knows what we need, who we are, and why we exist. But here's the danger. When we ignore this inner voice, when we bury it beneath the expectations of society, our family, our career, we begin to live inauthentically. We become what Jung described as a mask, a persona. The persona is useful. It allows us to function in the world. But if we cling too tightly to it, if we mistake the mask for the face, we suffer. Slowly, our psychic energy drains. Depression, anxiety, emptiness, these aren't random afflictions. They are signals, warnings from the soul that something vital has been lost. So let me ask you, how much of your life has been lived for others? How many times have you silenced your own desires just to avoid conflict, to be loved, or to appear good? And most dangerously, what if the very life you're living right now isn't truly yours at all? Jung would say this: if you feel invisible in your own story, if you feel like a stranger when you look in the mirror, it's not because something is wrong with you. It's because you've abandoned the path toward your true self. And here's the warning. The longer you betray your inner nature, the louder the consequences will become. Life itself will rise against you through restlessness, failed relationships, unexplained sadness, or a haunting sense that time is slipping by and you're not really living. In this video, we're going to explore Jung's profound warning about what happens when we deny our true self. We'll uncover why we hide behind masks and how society encourages us to do so, what psychic energy is, and why giving too much of it away leaves us hollow, how the shadow forms when we suppress parts of ourselves we fear or reject, and most importantly, how to reclaim the path of individuation, the journey back to authenticity, wholeness, and inner freedom. Because Jung did not just warn us of the danger, he also gave us a map. But make no mistake, this is not a comfortable journey. To find your true self, you must first confront how you've been living a false one. And that truth, once revealed, can be both terrifying and liberating. So let's return to Daniel, the man who gave everything, yet felt invisible. His story isn't unique. In fact, it may be your story, or the story of someone you love. And if you've ever whispered to yourself, "There must be more to life than this," then you are already standing at the edge of the path Jung spoke about. The question is, will you have the courage to walk it? Because Jung's warning is clear. If you do not live your true self, life itself will remind you, through suffering, emptiness, and longing, that you are not yet whole. And now, we begin to unravel why. Carl Jung believed that just as the body requires physical energy to function, The mind requires psychic energy. Every thought, emotion, and action consumes it. Unlike money, we cannot print more of it at will. It is finite, precious, and when misused, it leaves us hollow. Imagine your psychic energy as a flame. Every time you give in to obligations, put on a mask for others, or deny what you truly feel, a small piece of that flame is consumed. Now imagine doing this day after day, year after year, until you can barely feel warmth within. This is how the true self becomes starved. And here's the paradox: society rewards this depletion. The more you give to others, the more you are praised as dependable, selfless, a good person. Yet in the quiet places of your soul, a crisis brews, because the flame no longer burns for you. To Jung, this problem begins with the persona. The persona is the mask we wear in social life. It helps us adapt, fit in, and survive. Think of a teacher in front of their class, projecting authority and patience, or a parent pretending calm while inside they are full of worry. The persona is not false. It is a necessary social function. Without it, society would collapse into chaos. But here is where the danger lurks. When the mask becomes glued to the face, when you begin to believe that you are only what others expect of you. A woman may be praised as the perfect mother, but secretly yearn for a life of creativity she has abandoned. A man may be admired as a successful businessman, yet feel utterly disconnected from his passions. The persona gives them a script, but at the cost of silencing their authentic voice. Jung warned that clinging to the persona leads to psychic depletion, because instead of channeling energy toward the growth of the true self, you are pouring it endlessly into maintaining a mask. What happens to all the parts of yourself that don't fit the mask? The anger, the desires, the fears, the forbidden dreams. Jung called this the shadow, the collection of everything we repress, deny, or reject. The shadow is not evil. It is simply the parts of you that have been banished. But banishment does not mean disappearance. The shadow waits in the dark, whispering through dreams, slipping into sudden bursts of rage, surfacing in jealousy, or lurking in depression. Consider this. The friend who prides herself on being endlessly kind may explode with shocking cruelty one day. The disciplined worker who never complains may secretly sabotage himself with addictions. These are not accidents. They are eruptions of the shadow, demanding recognition. Jung's insight was revolutionary. Wholeness does not come from perfection, but from integration. To become your true self, you must face the shadow, acknowledge its voice, and give it a seat at the table of your being. Now let's return to the earlier image of Daniel, the man who gave everything yet felt invisible. What Daniel was truly suffering from was psychic depletion. When you are constantly available to others, when you say yes to every request, offer comfort to every pain, lend your time and attention without limit, you are not practicing compassion. You are bleeding your psychic energy into the void. And the result is devastating. You lose your identity, your vitality, your sense of being alive. People do not respect you more for your endless availability. They subconsciously devalue you. Jung would call this the paradox of emotional giving. The more you erase yourself for others, the more invisible you become. This wasn't just Jung's idea. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often and sometimes frightened. But no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." Nietzsche and Jung, though coming from different traditions, pointed toward the same truth. Society encourages conformity and self-erasure. It rewards the persona. But true vitality, true meaning, only emerges when one reclaims the inner flame, when one dares to live as the true self. So how does one reclaim this self? Jung described a lifelong journey he called individuation. Individuation is the process of becoming whole. It is not about becoming perfect, but about integrating the many conflicting parts of yourself into a balanced unity. It means embracing not only your persona, but also your shadow, your hidden desires, your wounded child, your unlived life. It means daring to ask, what do I want? What do I feel? What have I buried in order to survive? Jung believed that individuation is not optional. If you resist it, life will force it upon you through crises, breakdowns, and suffering. That restlessness you feel, that gnawing emptiness, that is the soul's demand for individuation. Consider Sarah, a rising executive in a multinational corporation. Outwardly, she is the picture of success, always composed, impeccably dressed, available for every call, every late-night meeting. She wears her persona flawlessly. But privately, Sarah admits she feels like an actress in a play. She no longer paints, though she once loved it. She no longer reads poetry, though it once made her heart sing. She is respected, yes, but she feels nothing. This is what Jung warned against. A life that looks full but feels empty. Because the persona consumes psychic energy but gives no nourishment in return. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard called it despair, the sickness of not being yourself. He argued that the greatest tragedy is not death, but going through life having never lived as your true self. Jung's psychology gives us a language for this despair. Every act of self-betrayal, every unspoken no, every smile that hides pain is a theft from the true self. And eventually, the soul demands repayment. The repayment comes in the form of emptiness, anxiety, meaninglessness. These are not enemies to be eliminated, they are messengers. They are telling you, you are not living your life. You are living a role. Jung's warning, then, is not abstract. It is visceral. It says, if you ignore the shadow, it will devour you in unconscious ways. If you cling to the persona, you will drain your psychic energy until nothing remains. If you refuse individuation, you will suffer despair, even in outward success. And yet, this warning carries hope, because suffering itself can be the doorway. The emptiness you feel may not be a curse. It may be the soul pulling you back to the path you abandoned. So ask yourself, how much of your life right now is authentic? How much is mask? When you feel that gnawing restlessness, do you dismiss it, or do you dare to listen? Because here lies the unsettling truth Jung reveals. What you call unhappiness may not be unhappiness at all. It may be the voice of your true self, begging to be heard. And this realization changes everything. Let's begin with a painful paradox. Most people believe that if they give endlessly to others, they will be loved in return. If you are always available, always kind, always forgiving, surely others will see your worth. Surely they will value you. But Jung would say, the opposite often happens. The more you erase yourself for others, the more invisible you become. The more you chase love through self-sacrifice, the less respect you earn. Why? Because love that is purchased through self-erasure is not love. It is dependency, utility, convenience. And people do not admire what costs them nothing. This is one of Jung's most disturbing insights, that to constantly give your psychic energy away is not a proof of love. It is a guarantee of self-erasure. Modern society has made this problem worse. We live in a culture that glorifies constant availability. At work, you are praised for answering emails at midnight. In friendships, you are considered loyal if you always drop everything to listen. In relationships, you are told love means giving endlessly, expecting nothing in return. But this is a trap, because the very thing you believe makes you valuable, your availability, gradually strips away the one thing that truly is valuable, your authentic self. Jung warned that the soul does not tolerate endless self-betrayal. You can pretend for years, even decades, but eventually the psyche revolts. Depression, burnout, numbness, even physical illness, all can be expressions of the psyche's protest. Think of the countless people who live as the good child, the reliable friend, the dependable spouse. Society praises them, families admire them, employers reward them. But peel back the mask and you often find exhaustion, resentment, despair. Why? Because their goodness was never free. It was paid for with psychic energy stolen from the true self. Here is the unsettling question. What if your greatest virtue, the very thing you're most praised for, is also the source of your greatest suffering? We've been taught to believe love grows the more you give. But what if love dies when there are no boundaries? Psychologists have found that people who lack personal boundaries often experience higher rates of anxiety, resentment, and relationship breakdown. Why? Because love without boundaries is not love. It is self-erasure disguised as kindness. This echoes Jung's insight. When you silence your own needs, you don't create intimacy, you create invisibility. Jung's persona is not just an individual problem, it is a cultural epidemic. Our society tells us, be productive, be agreeable, be whatever is needed. And slowly, people internalize this script so deeply that they no longer notice the mask at all. They begin to mistake the persona for their identity. This is why so many people reach middle age and suddenly collapse into what we call a midlife crisis. It is not merely boredom, it is the soul's rebellion. The true self, long ignored, erupts, demanding to be recognized. Jung wrote, "The greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived lives of the parents." And isn't it true? How many people pass down not wisdom but wounds, the wound of never having lived authentically? Let's go deeper. What happens to the parts of yourself you suppress to maintain the persona, the anger you never express, the desires you are ashamed of, the opinions you bury for the sake of peace? They don't disappear, they move into the shadow. And here is Jung's chilling revelation. What you repress will eventually control you. The person who prides themselves on being calm may one day explode in violence. The endlessly selfless mother may find herself consumed by bitterness toward the very children she sacrificed everything for. The moral man may be haunted by secret compulsions. Jung argued that most of human evil is not caused by monsters, but by ordinary people who refuse to acknowledge their shadow. The more you deny your darkness, the more it slips into your actions unconsciously. Modern psychology supports Jung's insight. Research on emotional suppression shows that people who habitually repress their feelings experience higher stress levels, weaker immune systems, and increased risk of depression. A study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that suppressing emotions doesn't erase them. It amplifies them internally, leading to greater distress. Suppression also reduces social connection because others sense inauthenticity even when they can't explain it. This confirms Jung's point. The shadow doesn't disappear. It waits, gathers energy, and finds ways to break free, often destructively. Here's the unsettling truth. Society doesn't just tolerate this cycle, it depends on it. Entire industries thrive on people who live as masks. Companies profit from employees who overwork themselves to exhaustion. Relationships continue because one partner sacrifices their identity to keep the peace. Even culture at large, social media, advertising, thrives on the performance of personas. You are rewarded for being the mask, but you are punished by your own soul. There's another layer here. Just as Barry Schwartz warned that too many choices paralyze us, Jung suggested that too much false freedom can destroy true freedom. When you deny your true self long enough, your choices are no longer real. You may think you are choosing freely, but in reality, you are choosing only from the persona's script. You choose the job that looks respectable, not the one that calls to your soul. You choose the partner who fits society's approval, not the one who awakens your heart. You choose a life of comfort, not a life of meaning. And yet, each of these choices feels strangely hollow, because they were never yours to begin with. Here lies perhaps the most unsettling revelation of all. The true self is patient, but time is not. You may postpone authenticity for years, even decades, but one day you will realize life has moved on. You cannot recover the years you gave away to being someone else. This is why Jung insisted that individuation, the reclaiming of the true self, is not a luxury. It is a necessity. To live otherwise is to risk reaching the end of your life only to discover you never lived at all. Here's a final disturbing thought. Many believe they are innocent victims of life's demands, that they had no choice but to wear the mask. But Jung would challenge this. He would say, every time you silence yourself, you are complicit in your own invisibility. Every time you give your energy away without question, you participate in your own erasure. This is a hard truth, but Jung believed that only by accepting this responsibility can true transformation begin. So let's pause and ask, what if your kindness is not kindness, but fear of rejection? What if your success is not success, but a mask of approval? What if your very identity, the person you show the world, is nothing more than a carefully constructed lie? And what if the emptiness you feel isn't failure, but the voice of your true self, demanding to be born? This is Jung's warning, not a gentle reminder, but a stark revelation. If you do not confront the mask, the shadow, and the false self, you will live an entire life without ever truly living. And now we arrive at the climax, the moment where everything turns, where the facade cracks, and the raw truth finally emerges. Imagine the moment the mirror finally refuses your mask. It's not fireworks or some cinematic collapse. It's a quiet, lethal clarity. The little compromises you told yourself were temporary now form a life you barely recognize. The applause you collected for being good, reliable, and available sounds thin. Beneath it, there is only an echo and an absence, your own voice. Here is the single, brutal revelation Jung wanted to force into our awareness. Giving yourself away does not make you more loved. It makes you invisible. The psychic energy you spend to keep other people comfortable is the very currency of your existence. When you spend it only on maintaining the persona, smoothing edges, performing kindnesses you don't feel, swallowing needs to avoid rejection, you are bankrupting your inner life. You remain useful, even adored, but you are no longer present to yourself. This is the paradox that overturns everything you thought you knew about virtue and sacrifice. We worship selflessness while simultaneously starving the soul. We admire the person who always has time, not noticing that time was stolen from someone else, the person they might have become. The more you play the role others expect, the less capacity you have to cultivate your own truth. The mask becomes not a tool but a prison. Philosophically, this is devastating because it betrays a misconception about freedom. You may think freedom is external, the freedom to choose roles, jobs, partners that look successful. But Jung teaches that true freedom is internal, the freedom to choose from a self that is whole, not hollow, to allow choices to come from voice within you rather than the script handed down by family, culture, or convenience. Without that inner sovereignty, every decision is compromised. Every yes is a small theft from your own life. The shadow presses the point. That which you refuse to acknowledge will not vanish. It will accumulate power in the dark. Repression doesn't erase needs, it mutates them into passive aggression, sudden outbursts, addictions, and chronic numbness. The persona's neat performance can mask this for a while, but at the cost of mounting inner pressure until the facade cracks. Now picture the moment of crack. A relationship implodes, a collapse of health, a midlife void, or an inexplicable unhappiness that money and social status cannot fix. These are not random punishments. They are the soul's emergency alarm, a last-ditch attempt to wake you to your own theft. So the turning point is this. You must stop mistaking the mask for the self. You must recognize that continual availability, emotional, temporal, psychic, is not a moral badge but a liability. You must see that the very life you built to be safe and acceptable may be the life that keeps you from becoming yourself. This is terrifying because it asks for responsibility. It asks you to admit that some of the very compromises that kept you loved and safe also kept you small. It asks you to choose an uncertain authenticity over a comfortable invisibility. And yet the alternative is worse. To reach the end of days with applause in your ears and an empty seat at the table of your inner life. The mask may be applauded, but the soul will still be waiting, and the longer it waits, the harder the recovery. This is the moment the story must pivot. The mask has been exposed. The shadow is audible. The question now is no longer theoretical. Will you step toward individuation, or will you stay a character in someone else's script? The moment of truth has passed. The mask has been seen for what it is. The shadow has been heard. Now the question becomes practical. What do you do next? Jung did not leave us only with warnings. He left us with a map back to the self. Below are concrete, usable steps to reclaim psychic energy, practice individuation, and start living your true life. Psychic energy is spent in tiny, repeated ways. Reclaiming it starts with small, repeatable acts of self-possession. Start with a simple no script. Try, "I can't help with that right now," or "I need to check my schedule," or "I'm not available this evening." Short, firm, non-apologetic. Create time blocks that are sacred. Protect 30-60 minutes each day for something that feeds you: reading, walking, drawing, thinking. Treat it like a medical appointment. Limit reactive availability. Turn off push notifications for non-essential apps. Respond to messages on your terms, not everyone else's timetable. These are small acts, but each no and each protected hour is a deposit back into the inner account that the persona has been drained. Seek creative outlets. Creativity is one of the most direct bridges to the true self: painting, music, writing, gardening. The goal is expression, not perfection. These are experiments, not guarantees. Some will fail. That's the point. Failure teaches you what is not your truth. A life reclaimed needs fewer, more meaningful choices. Adopt satisficing over maximizing. Decide what good enough looks like for routine choices, meals, outfits, minor purchases, so you reserve energy for high-stakes decisions that matter. Set default rules. Example, weekday evenings are family time, or I'll review new project proposals on Mondays. Defaults reduce daily friction. Limit options intentionally. If shopping, pick 3 trusted brands and choose from them. Fewer options create clearer desire. True freedom, Jung would suggest, is choosing from a centered self, not from an exhausted mind overwhelmed by trivial options. Individuation isn't solitary exile. Test boundaries with trusted people. Have one honest conversation. Tell a close friend or partner, "I'm working on living more authentically. I may say no more. Please bear with me." Watch how relationships rearrange, some deepen, some fade. Both outcomes clarify who supports your life. Find a mirror. Therapy, a coach, or a reflective friend can help you spot where you're still performing. Living your true self is not a selfish indulgence. It is an ethical act. When you reclaim your energy, integrate your shadow, and choose from a whole self, you become more capable of real generosity, because you give from abundance, not deficit. Authentic living ripples outward. Relationships deepen. Work becomes more meaningful, and the culture of masks begins to lose its grip. Jung's final kindness in all this is blunt. The soul is patient, but it will not be ignored forever. The suffering you felt is not merely an obstacle, it's an invitation. Answering it costs comfort, reputation, and perhaps some relationships, but it returns your life. Have you ever felt invisible despite always being there for others? Or do you find yourself exhausted by choices and small decisions? Share one boundary you will try this week in the comments. If this video nudged something awake in you, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded they belong to themselves. Will you keep living a life that looks full? Or will you choose a life that feels truly yours?